She didn't beg for mercy, she asked for fire. The first scream didn't wake Caleb. It was the silence that followed. He sat up in the dark, heart thudding. The wind outside clawed at the cabin like a starving dog. Something was off. The kind of quiet that came before avalanches or the barrel of a gun. He reached for the Winchester beside his cot and listened. There. A second noise. Not animal, not wind. A knock. No more like a collapse. Something or someone had just fallen against his door. He moved silently across the creaking floorboards, boots, unlaced steps, sure from decades spent listening to the woods instead of people. He opened the door slowly, rifle raised, and there she was. A woman, barefoot, bleeding from one leg, hair iced to her face in jagged strands. She looked up at him, not pleading, not afraid, just steady. "Let me stay," she rasped. "I'll work." Then she passed out. She didn't weigh much. Caleb carried her inside like he'd carried dead elk awkwardly, but with care. He laid her near the hearth, added fresh logs to the fire, and covered her with the old buffalo hide he'd nearly thrown out last fall. Her feet were raw, her hands cracked and blood-streaked. But what stunned him most was her breath, shallow but sure, like she wasn't done yet, like she refused to be done. He didn't ask questions, didn't touch her skin more than he had to, just worked silent as ever, boiled snow water, dried her feet, found salve, left a tin cup by her side. He didn't speak until an hour later, sitting on the opposite end of the room, staring at the flames. She didn't beg for mercy, he muttered to himself. She asked for fire. In the morning she hadn't moved, but her eyes were open. He poured hot water into the tin again, added a pinch of dried spruce bark, and slid it across the floor. She sat up slowly, sipped. No thanks, no name, just silence. He liked that. "Storm's letting up," he said. She didn't answer. He nodded once. Good. They didn't talk that day. He fixed the shed door that had nearly blown off its hinges. She dozed, waking only to sip broth or tend her bandaged foot. He noticed how her eyes followed everything rifle knife window, always measuring, always deciding. By evening, she'd managed to stand limping. She didn't ask for help. When he moved to light a second lamp, she flinched. Not a victim's flinch. A fighter's. One who knew the cost of being seen. Caleb didn't press. He handed her a blanket and nodded toward the cot. He'd sleep near the stove. Just before the lamp flickered out, she whispered, "Asha." He didn't look up, "Caleb," he said. Then nothing more. That night he dreamed of a frozen river and his wife's face under ice. He woke covered in sweat. Asha was standing at the window. She didn't turn. "What is it?" he asked, voice rough. She pointed. "Tracks." He rose, walked to her side. Outside in the moonlit snow, a set of boot prints circled the cabin. Not his. Morning came sharp and bitter. Caleb stepped outside with his rifle, checking the perimeter. The prints were fresh, at least 2 men, heavy set, one dragging something behind him. Maybe a sled. Maybe worse. When he came back in, Asha was already packing her meager things. "You running?" he asked. "No." Her voice was flat. "If I die, they win." That made him stop. He'd known fugitives, known innocents, knew how both smelled. She smelled like fire and earth and stubborn life. "What did you do?" he asked. She looked him in the eye. "I lived." Caleb didn't press. He didn't need to. He knew what it was like to be hunted for surviving what you weren't supposed to. Instead, he handed her one of his spare boots. They were too big, but better than bare feet in snow. They spent the rest of the day reinforcing the door, checking traps, staying quiet. When night fell again, he sharpened his blade by the fire. Asha sat across from him, her fingers twitching against her thigh, like she was playing an invisible drum. Outside, the woods were still. Too still. Just before dawn, Caleb slipped out to check the ridge behind the cabin. A habit. A warning system. He found something carved into a birch tree. A spiral, marked through with a cross of ash. He'd seen that symbol before. Once. Years ago. On a burned-out homestead south of Bannock territory. It wasn't just a warning. It was a death mark. When he returned to the cabin, Asha was gone. His gut sank until he saw her crouched near the creek, one hand in the water, the other gripping a stone like a weapon. She didn't startle when he approached. He crouched beside her. "Did they mark you?" he asked. She nodded once. "Why?" "They said I stopped a lineage." Caleb exhaled slowly. "You were someone's wife." She didn't answer. But that was answer enough. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did she. He sat by the fire, the rifle across his lap. She sat at the window, watching the woods like they might speak. Something in him shifted. Not pity. Not desire. Recognition. Whatever had driven her into the snow had also driven him here years before. And now they sat, two ghosts, pretending they were still flesh and blood. When the fire crackled low, she spoke. "Your cabin always this quiet?" Caleb stared into the coals. "Used to be worse." He didn't explain. She didn't ask. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, steady, but not silent. Because from the edge of the woods just beyond the fence line came a sound. A child's cry. Weak, painful, close. Caleb stood instantly. Asha didn't move. Her face went pale. "That's not an animal," she whispered. "No," he said, already moving toward the door. "It's bait." He nodded, but opened the door anyway. Caleb didn't lower the rifle. Not even when he saw the boy's hands clawing at the snow, fingers blackened from frostbite. Not even when he heard the child's voice, hoarse, raw, trembling with the kind of pain that wasn't just physical. He took 3 slow steps toward him, heart pounding. The kid was maybe 8, maybe 10. Hard to tell. His hair was scorched off in patches. His face was smeared with soot and tears. No coat, no boots. Just a shirt clinging to his back like wet parchment. Every breath came out like a warning. Asha moved behind Caleb, silent and tense. "Is it real?" she whispered. "If it ain't," he said. "It's dying real good." He knelt down slowly, setting the rifle just out of reach. The boy tried to pull away, but collapsed face first into the snow. Caleb turned him gently. The child flinched, but didn't fight. "I got you," Caleb said. The boy's eyes flickered open. One word cracked and low: "Fire." Caleb lifted him into his arms. The boy weighed less than a sack of flour. They brought him inside, Asha already clearing space by the hearth. She heated water while Caleb peeled off the frozen shirt, careful not to tear skin. His arms were bruised and covered in blistering welts. Smoke clung to him, heavy and real. Burns. Fresh. This wasn't bait. This was fallout. As the fire blazed and the boy shivered under quilts, Caleb asked the only question that mattered. "What's your name, kid?" The boy barely managed a whisper. "Elijah." Asha handed him broth, then crouched near the fire, watching with unreadable eyes. Elijah sipped twice, then broke down soft sobs, hiccuping pain. Caleb let him cry. He remembered the sound. He'd made it himself once after a fever took his baby girl. That kind of grief didn't care about age. It just opened inside you like a busted dam. That night, Caleb stayed by the fire, rifle in his lap again. Asha sat across from him, eyes flickering between Elijah and the window. "You think someone followed him?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. Not yet. But fire draws crows. Asha's fingers twitched. Caleb looked at her. You want to leave?" She shook her head. "I'm done running." She glanced toward the boy. "He reminds you of someone my son Caleb said, back when he was still laughing." Asha didn't pry. They watched the snow fall in silence. By morning, Elijah was stronger. He sat up slowly, holding the warm mug with shaking hands. Caleb cut dried meat into slivers and passed them over. The boy chewed like he hadn't eaten in days. "You remember where you came from?" Caleb asked. Elijah nodded. "Cabin, South Ridge, past the elk hollow." Caleb's face darkened. "Ain't much out there." "There was," Elijah said, "till it burned." Asha spoke gently. "What happened?" Elijah stared into the flames. "I woke up coughing. Everything smelled like smoke. Pa was gone. Ma, too. But the back wall, it was open. I ran." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know where to go, just kept walking." His hands curled into fists. "If the fire didn't kill me," he muttered, "I figured I ought to keep going." Caleb looked over at Asha. "That line's gonna stick," he said. She nodded slowly. It already did. Later that day, Caleb saddled his mule. Needed to check the ridge. Confirm the story. Asha stayed behind with Elijah's rifle within reach. The sky was bruised gray by noon. Caleb found the cabin after 4 hours of hiking. It had collapsed inward, a black skeleton of timber and ash, burned hot, fast, and deliberate. Too clean for an accident. He circled the remains. Found no prints but fresh tracks along the western slope, booted deep and headed north. Not tribal, not local. Mercenaries, maybe. Or worse, bounty men. He headed back. When he returned, Elijah was asleep again, curled beside Asha near the fire. She met Caleb's eyes. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" "No," he said. "Someone lit it for him." Her voice lowered. "To send a message or erase one," Caleb replied. He stared into the fire. "I think they were hunting someone else." The next morning brought wind, strong enough to shake the shutters. Caleb added another layer of logs to the door. They'd need to stay hunkered for a few days. Jedediah showed up before noon. He looked older, his beard longer, streaked with gray and dried blood on his sleeve. "Company's coming," he said. Caleb nodded. "I figured." Jed looked at the boy. "That yours?" Caleb shook his head. "No. He's just burned like the rest of us." Jed dropped a leather pouch on the table. Inside, ammunition, flint, and a torn scrap of parchment. It was a bounty map, hand-drawn. Asha's name was scratched at the top. Below it, dead or alive. A price in red ink. Elijah stirred from his sleep and looked at the paper. His eyes widened. I saw that he whispered. "Back in Derby, on the post wall." Asha's jaw tightened. Jed looked at her. "They put a price on you. Big one." Asha stood slowly. "Let them come." Jed raised a brow. "You always this stubborn." "Only when breathing," she said. Jed laughed once. "Fair." After he left, Caleb began reinforcing the windows with nailed-down planks. Asha sewed a second blanket for Elijah. The boy followed Caleb around the cabin like a shadow. That night, as they cleaned the rifles, Elijah sat near Asha, voice small. "You ever been in a fire before?" She looked at him. "I walked through one." He blinked. "What happened?" "I lived." He seemed to accept that. "Then why do they want to hurt you?" Asha didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she said, "You know what it means to be blamed for something you didn't break." Elijah nodded slowly. Asha looked him in the eye. "Then you already know enough." When Elijah was asleep, Caleb poured 2 cups of pine tea. He handed one to Asha. "We're gonna need help," he said. She didn't ask from where. She just looked at the rifle leaning against the door, then said, "I'll shoot first." Caleb studied her face. "You scared?" She didn't blink. "I'm tired," she said. "Not scared." He looked out the window. The snow had stopped, but the cold felt deeper. A pause. Then he asked, "You think the boy's strong enough?" Asha looked at the child. "If the fire didn't kill him," she whispered, "he's already strong enough." That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat outside for hours watching the trees, thinking about the boy who came from fire, the woman marked for death, and the silence that lived between all of them. Tomorrow he'd head to see Jedediah again. They'd need more than guns. They'd need knowledge. And time was thinning. Because the people who set Elijah's world on fire, they were coming for theirs next. Caleb left at dawn with the mule, the wind at his back, and a storm pressing low along the mountains. He didn't like leaving Asha and Elijah alone, but Jedediah lived 2 valleys west past the Split Rock Ridge and over the frozen creek. If anyone knew what kind of men carried bounties this far north, it was Jed. The trail narrowed through thick pine branches heavy with old snow. Every crunch beneath his boots sounded too loud. Caleb kept his rifle slung low and eyes scanning for movement. A wrong step up here could cost you more than your footing. It could cost your life. By noon, he found smoke twisting above the tree line. Jed's place. He approached slow. Jed was outside, crouched over a rabbit snare. His old dog barked once but didn't move. Jed turned, scowled, and spit into the snow. "Didn't think I'd see you before spring." "I wouldn't be here," Caleb said, "if the world wasn't burning again." Jed stood, cracked his back. "Ain't it always?" Inside the cabin smelled like pine pitch and boiled roots. Jed poured whiskey into 2 chipped cups and leaned against the table. Caleb pulled the bounty scrap from his coat. "You seen this?" Jed nodded slowly. "Saw one posted in Darby, another in Horseshoe Bend. Somebody paid real good to spread it." Jed took a long drink, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Names don't always matter, Caleb. What matters is what they want." Caleb frowned. "They want her dead." Jed's eyes narrowed. "She's the Bannock woman, ain't she? She saved a boy last week." "Elijah. Cabin was burned to nothing." Jed whistled low. "Then it's already started." Caleb tensed. What has Jed reached for a leather pouch and dropped it onto the table? Inside, a carved bone pendant, ash blackened on one end. "I pulled this off a bounty hunter's neck. Found him near Bear Creek, throat slit, supplies untouched. But this," he tapped the pendant, "that mark means he was working with the Gray Ledger." Caleb's gut turned. The Gray Ledger were mercs, not lawmen, paid killers with no code, no leash. "They're moving north?" Caleb asked. Jed nodded. which means somebody down south is scared she's still breathing. Caleb leaned forward. Why now? She's been quiet. Jed poured more whiskey. Sometimes silence is the loudest sound. And you know how it is when a woman escapes, the fire folks don't cheer. They wonder what she brought with her. Caleb exhaled slow. Some things in these woods ain't meant to survive, but they do anyway. Jed smiled, but there was no joy in it. You think you're hiding her, but truth is she's already louder than a gunshot. Outside, the wind howled. Caleb stood. We need supplies, ammo, food, maybe a place to fall back to. Jed nodded. You'll get it, but it won't stop them. Not this kind. I'm not trying to stop them, Caleb said. I'm buying time. Back at the cabin, Asha stared at the fire while Elijah played with a stick in the ash bucket, drawing crooked shapes on the floorboards. He paused. Do you think he's coming back? Asha didn't answer immediately. Yes. How do you know? She thought about that. Because men like him leave different than others. When they go, the silence feels heavier. Elijah nodded like he understood. Then he asked, Did you ever run away? Asha didn't look at him. I walked away. That's different. What were you walking from? She didn't speak. Elijah nodded again, slower this time. Okay. Later, as the wind picked up, Asha showed Elijah how to heat rocks in the fire and wrap them in cloth to keep warm in bed. He listened, eager, hungry to learn anything, to belong. He was a boy without an anchor, and yet he'd survived the storm. That made him dangerous and precious. Caleb returned that evening, clothes stiff with ice mule dragging a small sled of supplies. Asha helped him unload. Jed. He's watching the passes. Said the gray ledger's coming. She swallowed hard. They'll find us. Eventually, Caleb said, but not tonight. Elijah emerged from the cabin, eyes bright. Did you bring bullets? Caleb tossed him a pouch, small ones, for training. Elijah beamed. As they restocked the cabin, Asha noticed a new stiffness in Caleb's movements. His jaw was set tight, shoulders tense. You saw something, she said. He didn't deny it. Bounty map had lines drawn too close. Someone's marked our ridge. Asha looked toward the window. They'll come in from the east, she murmured. Wind masks the sound. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You sure? She nodded. I know how they move. He studied her, not with suspicion, but with respect. You ever want to be forgotten? He asked. She folded a blanket, careful and slow. I wanted to be invisible. That's not the same. He understood that too well. That night, Caleb sat with Jed's pendant in hand, watching the fire throw shadows across the walls. Elijah had fallen asleep, curled beneath furs. Asha leaned against the doorframe, sharpening a knife that had seen more than its share of blood. You ever get tired? Caleb asked. She looked up. Of surviving, she nodded once. Most nights. He stared into the coals. I was tired before you even got here. They sat in silence. Then she said, But you're still breathing. Only because I forgot how to stop. She smiled, faint. Same. The next morning, tracks appeared near the creek. Too deep for deer, too long for elk. Caleb found them early while checking traps. He followed them for half a mile, then saw it. A sigil carved into the bark of a birch tree. Same as the bounty map. He hurried back, heart pounding. When he arrived, Asha was already packing. They found us, he said. I know, she replied. You smell it before you see them. Elijah clutched his coat eyes wide. What do we do? Asha crouched beside him. We survive, she said, but this time we don't run. Caleb loaded the rifles, then out of habit checked the sky. Snow was coming, which meant they had time but not much. As dusk settled in, a coyote howled from the ridge. Elijah startled. Asha didn't flinch. She whispered, some things in these woods ain't meant to survive, but they do anyway. Caleb looked at her and for the first time in days felt something flicker in his chest. Not fear, not dread, something smaller. Hope. And maybe that was enough. The fire came just before midnight. Caleb woke to the sound of snapping timber and the smell of smoke. The wind howled through the cracks in the roof, carrying with it the dry hiss of burning pine. He rolled from his cot boots, half-laced rifle already in hand. Asha was up too, clutching Elijah to her chest, as sparks drifted through a gap in the wall. Outside, orange light licked at the snow, unnatural, hungry. Back wall, Caleb shouted, shoving open the door. Heat slammed into him like a wave. The shed was burning flames, climbing the wood like snakes. He grabbed a bucket, filled it with snow, and threw it against the boards. Steam burst upward, stinging his face. Asha ran past him, a blanket over her head, flinging snow with her bare hands. Elijah followed, coughing hard. They fought the fire until the flames shrank back into sullen embers, leaving black scars across the cabin's edge. The night fell silent again, heavy and cruel. Caleb stood panting, smoke curling from his beard. Asha's hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest. They didn't come to kill her fast, he muttered. Asha looked up. What did you say? He pointed to the door. Hanging from a splintered nail was a small antler talisman carved with runes. It swayed gently, the firelight making it look alive. They wanted us scared first, Caleb said. Wanted you to know they were close. Asha stared at the charm for a long moment, her breath frosting in the cold. She reached out, tore it down, and threw it into the fire. The carved runes hissed as they burned. They'll come again, she said, but not tonight. Caleb nodded, jaw tight. Not tonight. They stayed awake until dawn, watching the last of the smoke drift across the snow. When morning came, the light looked wrong, too pale, too thin. Caleb found the tracks leading away from the cabin, 2 men on foot heading east toward the ridge. He followed them far enough to know they weren't coming back yet, then returned to find Asha sitting by the hearth, staring at her bandaged hands. Tell me, he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and wary. You already know, she said. I want to hear it. She took a long breath. The silence between them felt like ice cracking on a river. My name was given by the elder who owned me, she began. He was High Chief Keeper of the bloodline. When I married him, the people sang for 3 days. They said I'd bring strong sons. Her voice thinned. But there were no sons, no daughters. Nothing. And when a year passed, the women whispered. When 2 passed, the men stopped looking me in the eye. Caleb listened without moving. The old man told them I was cursed, Asha said. Said I carried bad spirits in my blood. He couldn't be shamed, so he made me the shame. One night they tied me to a pole by the river, left me there to freeze. Said, if I lived till morning, the curse would leave. I didn't die. Caleb's throat tightened. So they called you a witch? She nodded once. And I believed them. For a long time I did. Elijah, sitting on the floor near the hearth, spoke softly. You're not a witch. Asha smiled faintly sadness in the curve of her mouth. No. But I stopped being theirs the night I walked away. Caleb reached for the coffee pot, poured 2 tin cups, and handed her one. You walked far, he said. Far enough to forget the sound of my own name, she said. Until now. The three of them sat there for a while, the fire crackling low. The world outside was all white silence. Inside, something warmer began to take shape, fragile but real. By afternoon, the air cleared enough for Caleb to check the traps along the creek. Asha stayed behind with Elijah, teaching him how to mend torn cloth using thread from a deerskin pouch. The boy was clumsy, but patient. When Caleb returned, his face was hard. 2 bodies down by the ridge, he said. Both shot. Jed's work. Asha's hand froze on the needle. He's still watching. He's always watching, Caleb said. He sent a message, more are coming. He said to stay off the trails. Elijah's eyes widened. What if they find us? Caleb crouched in front of him. Then we fight smart. You stay close to Asha. Understand? The boy nodded, trying to be brave. That night, a storm rolled over the valley. Snow hammered the roof, rattled the windows, howled down the chimney. Caleb stood by the fire, staring at the shadows. He'd been through winters worse than this, but something about this one felt different. He wasn't alone anymore. That changed the stakes. Asha sat by the table, cleaning her knife. When it stopped snowing, she said, I'll need to go to the river. Why? To bury what's left of him, she said, voice steady. The elder. I still carry something that belongs to him. Caleb frowned. You sure that's wise? I'm sure I'm tired of ghosts, she said. He nodded. Then I'll go with you. Outside, thunder cracked across the mountains like the sound of old gods arguing. Hours later, when the fire had burned down to embers, Caleb woke to find Asha gone. Panic hit him sharp. He pulled on his coat and stepped into the storm. The snow was knee-deep, visibility poor. Then he saw her, a dark figure kneeling in the snow by the creek. She held something small in her hands, a braid of her own hair tied with red thread. She placed it on the ice, whispered words he didn't understand, and let it drift away on the current. Caleb stepped closer. What are you doing? Leaving the last piece of her behind. Asha said, voice trembling. The woman who believed she was cursed. He looked at her, not sure what to say. She met his eyes. You think that makes me weak? He shook his head. No. Makes you dangerous. Her smile was faint, almost invisible through the snow. Then we're the same. They walked back to the cabin in silence. Elijah was asleep by the fire, curled beneath furs. The storm eased toward morning, leaving only a thin mist crawling over the trees. Caleb poured himself a drink from the whiskey jug Jed had left and sat down opposite her. You should rest, he said. I will. But she didn't. She watched the window, eyes fixed on the dark. He followed her gaze and froze. A shadow moved between the trees, slow, deliberate. He reached for his rifle. Asha did the same. The shape stopped 20 paces out, half hidden behind a birch. Friend or foe, Caleb called. No answer. Then the figure turned, and moonlight caught a face he knew. Jedediah. But something was wrong. Blood darkened his shoulder, his coat torn open. Caleb ran to the door as Jed staggered forward, dropping to one knee. Boone, Jed coughed, spit red into the snow. They're closer than I thought. Who? Caleb demanded. Jed looked up, eyes glassy. Ledger men. 3 days out. Maybe less. Asha knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. Jed caught her wrist. "Don't waste it," he rasped. "You'll need it." His hand dropped away. Caleb stared down at the old man's body. The wind howled again, colder than before. Asha rose, her voice barely a whisper. "Then we have no time left." Caleb looked toward the east ridge where the forest met the sky. Somewhere out there in the dark, men were already moving. He checked the rifle jaw set. "Then we'll meet them halfway." The fire cracked, throwing long shadows across the walls. The night was far from over. And for the first time, Asha didn't feel hunted. She felt ready. They left at first light. The cold was sharper than usual, the kind that chewed through cloth and skin like it had teeth. Elijah stayed behind with a loaded rifle and a circle of salt poured around the hearth, a trick Asha taught him, not for real defense, but for courage. Caleb led the way, rifle strapped tight, eyes sharp. Asha followed with Jedediah's old satchel slung over her shoulder. Inside it, a small ledger, 3 sealed cartridges, and a torn corner of the bounty notice with her name half burned through. They moved east toward the ridge where Jed said the ledger men were camped. The forest thinned out there, giving them sight lines, but it also made them visible. After an hour, Caleb broke the silence. "You sure you're up for this?" Asha didn't look at him. "I'm sure I'm done waiting." Caleb nodded. That was enough. They reached a bluff just before noon, overlooking the valley floor. Below, 3 figures moved between horses, distant but close enough to study. They wore gray dusters and carried rifles slung low, the kind of men who didn't talk unless they were collecting. Asha crouched beside Caleb, glassing them through Jed's spyglass. "They're not scouts," she said. "They're hunters." Caleb adjusted his coat. "You recognize any of them?" She hesitated, then pointed. "That one. Tall, with the knife at his back. Name's Bragg. He used to run with a trader on the Red Fork." "What's he want now?" She looked at him. "What they always want. Proof." Caleb studied the way the men moved. Calculated. Slow. "They're not in a hurry. They think they've got time," she said. "Let's take that from them." They waited until dusk before circling the ridge. Asha moved like shadow, silent, deliberate. Caleb followed slower, favoring his right knee on the steeper slopes. He hated how age clung to him now like a second coat he couldn't shake. At the ridge base, they paused behind a fallen log. Asha whispered, "We scare them tonight, they'll regroup. We kill one, they scatter." Caleb checked his revolver. "That easy?" "No," she said, "but simple." She pulled a small pouch from her coat and handed it to him. "What's this pine resin flint shavings, black powder? Light it, throw it. Makes a scream and a flash." He smiled. "You've been holding out on me. You wouldn't have used it right." They split Caleb, circling wide through the underbrush, Asha moving in straight and low. The wind picked up, covering their steps. As they moved, the fire from earlier came back to Asha's mind. Not the one that hit the shed. The older one. The one she'd walked through. That night she'd carried no weapon, no name. Just rage and the memory of rope burns on her wrists. Now she carried both. As the camp came into view, she saw Bragg sitting by the fire, a tin cup in hand, talking low to the others. She crouched behind a boulder, listening. "Just smoke her out." "Don't need to drag it out," Bragg said. The other man, lean, sharp-eyed, snorted. "Boss said, bring her alive if we can." Bragg spat. "She's not worth the trouble. Ain't no legend gonna save her." That's when Caleb struck. The resin bomb landed in the center of the fire pit, with a dull thud. Bragg turned just as it lit up bright as lightning, loud as a scream. The camp exploded into chaos. Asha moved. She dropped one man with a clean shot to the shoulder. The second reached for his pistol, but she slammed into him with her knife blade to throat. He gurgled once and collapsed. Bragg vanished into the trees. Caleb limped in from the other side, breathing hard. "You get him?" he asked. Asha shook her head. He ran. Which way? He looked down at the tracks in the snow. North, back toward the ridge trail. Caleb cursed. "He's going to call in more." Asha picked up the dead man's rifle, checked the chamber. "Then we finish what we started." They moved fast, following the trail. Bragg's footprints veered sharp, erratic. He was scared now. Good. Fear made men sloppy. After 10 minutes, they found his blood on a broken branch, then a smear across a rock. He was injured. "He's slowing down," Caleb said. "He's looking for high ground," Asha replied. "Sniper's instinct. Think he'll double back." She shook her head. "Not if he thinks we're behind." They pressed on. It was nearly full dark when they reached the ridge summit. Asha slowed, motioned for silence. A shot cracked dirt exploded near Caleb's boot. They dove behind cover. Bragg's voice echoed from the rocks. "You think you're clever, witch?" Asha didn't answer. "I should have killed you when they threw you out. Watched you freeze like the dog you are." She stayed low, breathing even. Then she stood. Caleb hissed, "What the hell are you?" She walked into the open arms at her sides. Bragg stood atop the ridge, rifle raised. "You always this stupid," he yelled. "No," she said, "but I'm always this angry." She drew and fired. The first bullet hit his shoulder. The second caught his leg. He fell hard, rifle skidding across the rocks. Caleb ran up after her, covering as she approached. Bragg was trying to crawl away, blood trailing behind. "Go ahead," he spat. "Do it. Make your legend." Asha stood over him. "I'm not interested in legends," she said. "I'm interested in warnings." He blinked. "What?" She knelt beside him. "You go back," she said. "You tell them what you saw, that the witch they want doesn't hide anymore. She hunts." His lip trembled. She pressed the barrel of his own rifle to his hand. "Next time," she said, "I take the fingers." Then she stood and walked away. Caleb stared after her, breath visible in the cold. That was risky. She didn't turn. So is being born. They reached camp again near midnight. Elijah was awake, sitting by the fire with wide eyes. "You're okay?" he asked. Caleb nodded. "We are." Asha sat down, unstrapped her boots. Her hands shook. She didn't hide it. Elijah reached into the fire's light and handed her something, a carved wooden feather. "I made it," he said. "For you. 'Cause you flew back." She looked at him, stunned. Caleb watched her face soften for the first time in days. "You're not wrong," she whispered. "Sometimes the only way through is to burn." She took the feather and set it beside her knife. Outside, the cold deepened, but inside the cabin something had changed, and Bragg's screams would carry far in the coming days. They weren't just surviving now. They were sending messages. And someone was listening. The snow fell steady as Asha sat sharpening her blade, thinking not about the next fight, but about what it meant to stay. She sat on the cabin's front step, the whetstone whispering against the steel in slow, patient arcs. Each scrape was a rhythm, like breathing, like memory. Inside, Elijah slept soundly, tucked beneath thick pelts. Caleb was out gathering traps, making a wider loop, now that the ridge had been cleared. But Asha couldn't shake the weight in her chest. Not fear, not even grief, just gravity, the kind that comes when you stop running. Since Bragg's retreat, no new men had come. The ridge was quiet, the woods still. Too still. That afternoon, she took Elijah walking deeper into the woods where the pines opened into frost-choked glades. She carried her knife at her belt and a slingshot for Elijah. He walked proudly beside her, eyes always searching for tracks in the snow. "Is it always like this after a fight?" he asked. "Quiet, you mean," she said. He nodded. For a while she replied, "Like the land's holding its breath." He chewed that over. "So, what happens when it lets go?" Asha smiled faintly. "Depends on who's still standing." They reached a fallen tree and sat drinking water from canteens. Birds flitted in the trees, their movements sharp against the stillness. Elijah asked about the feather he'd given her, and she reached into her coat, pulling it from the pocket where she'd kept it since that night. "It's a reminder," she said, "of what doesn't break." He looked at her, "Like you." She held his gaze. "Like us." That night the wind shifted. Warmer now. Snow turned wet, melting on the roof in slow drips. Caleb returned late, dragging 2 hares and a satchel of dry roots. "Forest's waking up," he said, setting the hares down for cleaning. Found boot prints. Smaller than before. 2 sets. Asha tensed. Scouts, maybe. Or maybe people running the other way. Elijah looked up. "Like us, no," Asha said softly. "We're not running anymore." They ate together by the fire, silence filling the space between bites. After Caleb poured himself a drink and stepped outside, Asha joined him, arms crossed, breath misting in the dark. "You think Bragg kept his word?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "He's a coward, not a fool. He'll warn them." "Then why hasn't anyone come?" Caleb looked at the stars. "Because they're deciding if it's worth it. Ledger doesn't chase ghosts unless the price goes up." She considered that. "Then maybe it's time we set the cost." He glanced at her. "What are you thinking?" "We take it south," she said. "Show them we're not hiding." His brow furrowed. "Elijah comes with us," she said. "This is his fight now, too." Caleb leaned against the porch beam. "You always this certain?" "No," she said. "But I'm always this ready." They stayed out there a while longer, watching the clouds roll in. The wind had turned again, this time from the south. The next morning they packed light. Caleb repaired the old sled, strapped it with supplies. Elijah wore his boots like armor hat pulled low. Asha checked every weapon twice. Her knife gleamed like a new truth. As they prepared to leave, Elijah paused at the door. "Will we come back?" Asha rested a hand on his shoulder. "Only if we build something worth returning to." They set off at midday, heading south toward Drywell, the closest town that hadn't been entirely swallowed by silence. The snow was thinner here, the land turning from white to brown, from ice to mud. Tracks were everywhere, human animal, some fresh, some old, all signs of movement. By dusk, they made camp near a dry creek bed. Caleb lit a fire while Asha snared rabbits. Elijah gathered wood and kept watch. As they ate, Caleb pulled out a small, folded paper. "Letter from Levi," he said. "Jed must have passed it along." He opened it, read aloud. "Whispers are growing louder. Towns talk. Names rise like steam. Yours is one." People want to believe, but they need to see. Asha took the letter, folded it again. They will, she said. At Drywell, the town looked like it had been held together by stubbornness alone. Boards nailed over broken windows, a saloon with no door, a post office turned clinic. But people were there, tired, wary, but present. Asha walked straight down the center of town. Heads turned, hands paused on tools. No one drew. Not yet. They reached the general store. Caleb knocked. An old woman opened the door, rifle in hand. Her eyes widened. I'll be damned. You remember me? Asha asked. The woman nodded slowly. You fixed the irrigation line last spring. Asha nodded. We're not here to hide. The woman lowered the rifle. You better come inside. Inside, they sat at a table that had once been a meat counter. The old woman, her name was Alma, poured coffee hot and strong. You know what you're doing? She asked. No, Asha said. But I know what I won't do anymore. Alma smiled. That'll do. By evening, word had spread. Others came. Ranchers, widows, a few rough types with pistols. They filled the store in silence. Asha stood. I'm not here to lead, she said. I'm not here to be followed. She pulled the charred bounty scrap from Jed's satchel and held it up. I'm here because they thought this paper would end me. She tore it in two. They were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. We're all being hunted, she said. Maybe not by name, maybe not yet. But if we let this kind of fear keep winning, none of us will have a name left worth remembering. Caleb watched the faces, hardened, softened, lit. Asha stepped forward. I'm not a ghost, she said. I'm not a witch. I'm not a symbol. She paused. I'm just someone who stopped running. That night they stayed in the store. No one asked them to leave. Alma gave them a key to the upstairs rooms. Elijah fell asleep fast, curled against a wool coat. Caleb sat in a rocking chair by the window. Asha joined him, staring at the stars beyond the broken pane. You believe in second chances? He asked. I believe in the work it takes to earn one, she said. He nodded, then softly. You ever wonder if peace is just another kind of wound, one we don't know how to carry? She turned to him, maybe, but I'd rather carry peace than regret. He reached for her hand, not to hold it, just to feel it was real. And together in the dark above a tired town, they watched the quiet settle. But in the morning, the South Road would call again. And this time they wouldn't ride for safety. They'd ride for witness. The road out of Drywell was cracked and narrow, lined with rust-colored rocks and whispers carried on the wind. Asha rode at the front, her coat flapping behind her like a black sail. Caleb followed close, Elijah between them on a mule that had seen better decades. No one spoke for the first hour. Every fence post, every bent tree branch, they watched it all. Because people who'd once been hunted didn't forget how to scan the edge of the trees. By midday, the land opened into a shallow basin ringed by cottonwoods and dry creeks. Once this had been a gathering place for cattlemen. Now it was mostly wind and bones. They stopped at an old stone well to water the animals. Asha leaned over, stared into the dark. How deep you think that goes? Caleb asked. She didn't answer at first, then deep enough to forget what's at the bottom. Elijah dropped a pebble. It took 4 seconds to hit water. They rode again before sunset. The plan was simple, or seemed that way. Make it to Roost Hollow, a town 3 days south where Levi had set up a quiet base. No flags, no armies, just people learning how to listen again. Word was folks from 4 different tribes and 3 broken counties had already passed through, but plans rarely stayed simple for long. That night, as they made camp beneath a bluff, Asha noticed something strange, 2 trails at the edge of the basin that hadn't been there yesterday. One went north toward Dry Well, the other angled southeast, same direction they were heading. She stood, walked the edge of camp, studying the prints in the moonlight. Light boots. Fresh. Riders, Caleb asked. Scouts, she replied. Not Ledger, too quiet. Might be renegades. Friendly only to themselves. He nodded grimly. We keep moving at first light. The second day passed quieter than the first, but quieter never meant safer. Elijah spotted smoke mid-morning, thin and distant. They detoured wide, circling a dry ridge. Asha's nerves sharpened with every mile. Caleb could feel it in her silence, in the way her eyes scanned not just the land, but the sky, like she was expecting it to fall. They reached a gulch by dusk, crossed on foot. Halfway down the slope, Elijah froze. What is it? Caleb whispered. There, the boy said, pointing. Something moved. Asha drew her revolver slow. Caleb raised his rifle. Then came the sound, a cough. Human. Weak. They moved as one, cresting a boulder, weapons drawn. A woman sat at the bottom of a shallow ditch, blood on her arm hair matted with sweat. She looked up, eyes sunken and feral. Please, she rasped. Don't leave me. Asha dropped low, checked her wound. It was a clean-cut blade, not bullet. Caleb stayed back, watching the horizon. Who did this to you men? She said. 5 of them. They took my sister. Asha's jaw tightened. Where? She pointed south. Toward the bluff. Said they needed proof. Said they'd send her back in pieces if I followed. Caleb cursed under his breath. Same kind of men as Bragg. She nodded, shaking. Worse. Asha stood. We have to go. Caleb looked at her. What about the boy? I'll go, she said. Alone. You keep him safe. Elijah grabbed her coat. I want to help. She looked down at him. You already are. Stay alive. That's how we win. She took a skin of water, a knife, and disappeared into the dark. The trail was easy to follow. These weren't hunters. They were butchers. Left trash, broken branches, cigarette butts like breadcrumbs. Asha moved fast, a blur through the moonlight. Heart hammering like war drums. An hour in, she heard the voices laughing, taunting, unafraid. She saw their fire first, then their shadows. 5 of them, just as the woman had said. One kept watch. The others circled a girl no older than 16, tied to a post. Asha waited, watched. She remembered what Caleb had said once in a different season. You don't win by being louder. You win by being last. She threw a stone across the clearing. The lookout turned, walked toward the sound. She slit his throat before he could breathe. Then the next. By the time the third saw her, it was too late. Her knife found his ribs twisted, and he fell into the fire. The fourth screamed and ran. She let him carry that scream. The fifth stood by the girl, pistol shaking. Don't, Asha warned. He hesitated. She shot him in the leg. He went down screaming. The girl sobbed as Asha cut her free. She handed her a coat. Whispered, run north. Find a man named Boone and a boy named Elijah. Say Asha sent you. The girl nodded, barefoot and bloodied, and vanished into the trees. Asha turned back to the bleeding man. He was crying now. Why he begged. She knelt beside him. Because people like you think you own fear, but you don't. Then she took his boots and left him there alone to feel every mile of the cold on his own. She returned to camp near dawn, face unreadable. Caleb stood up, fast relief warring with worry. Elijah's inside, he said. The girl made it back. Said you sent her. Asha nodded once, sat by the fire, and pulled off the stolen boots. She set them down beside the flames like trophies. You all right? Caleb asked. She didn't look at him. Just said, some men don't come to kill you. They come to make you forget who you are. He sat beside her. And you, I remember now. The fire popped. Wind hissed through the sage. Then she whispered, we're not ghosts anymore, Caleb. We're the storm they forgot to pray for. Later, as the sky pinked with morning, they broke camp again. No longer just fugitives. No longer just survivors. Something stronger had taken root. The girl rode with them now. Her name was Luma. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was with clarity. Fire had passed through her too, and left behind iron. As they headed toward Roost Hollow, a bird flew overhead, hawk silent and sharp. Elijah pointed. Is that a sign? Asha looked up. No, she said, then smiled thin and certain. It's a warning. They kept riding, and behind them, somewhere far off, the man she'd left bleeding in the woods would wake up and start talking. Because fear spreads faster than bullets, and she'd just loaded the world with enough of both. Roost Hollow rose from the fog, like a secret half-remembered its streets, paved in dust and silence, its people watching from behind shuttered glass. Asha, Caleb, Elijah, and Luma rode into town just past dawn. Their horses moved slow, careful. No one greeted them. No one called out. Just the sound of hooves and wind scraping along wooden siding. The place smelled of old smoke and boiled coffee, and something else, anticipation. Caleb leaned toward Asha. You sure this is the right place? She nodded. Levi said, look for the blue door with the horseshoe nailed sideways. Said it means willing to listen. They found it halfway down the main drag beside a crumbling apothecary and what used to be a barber shop. Asha knocked twice. Waited. The door creaked open. A short man with a long coat and coal-black beard stepped into view. He squinted at Asha, then smiled like seeing a ghost. I'll be damned, he said. Thought you were just another ghost story. Asha stepped forward. I'm tired of being one. The man's name was Levi Boone. He'd once been a preacher. Now he ran a communication ring through broken mining towns and off-grid ranches. He led them inside past shelves of preserved fruit and stacked crates of ammunition. You were supposed to come 2 weeks ago, he said, as they entered the back room. Plans changed, Asha replied. We picked up a few passengers. He glanced at Elijah and Luma. Good thing you did. He closed the door behind them and unrolled a large canvas map across the table. It was worn soft at the edges, marked with pins and chalk lines. Asha leaned in. These dots, places we've made contact, Levi said. Small, scattered, but steady. No big flags, no speeches, just people talking again. Asha nodded slowly. That's more than I hoped for. Levi pointed to the southern edge. But here's where it gets tricky. Ledger's moving again. Not in squads, but whispers. Buying land, paying off old debts. They're changing faces. The war's not over, it's just quieter. Caleb leaned in. So they're preparing for a different kind of fight. Yeah, Levi said. One where they smile while they put the chains back on. That afternoon, they rested in a small bunkhouse behind Levi's store. Luma helped Elijah learn how to set traps using bent nails and string. Caleb sat on the porch, cleaning his rifle. Asha stayed with the map. She studied it like scripture fingers trailing the ridgelines and old trail routes. Each dot meant someone brave enough to speak. Each absence meant someone lost. When Caleb stepped inside, she didn't look up. "I can feel it," she said. "The way it's shifting." He joined her at the table. "What's the move, visibility?" she replied. "They've painted us as ghosts, symbols. But if we show up in daylight, help fix things out loud, people will start seeing us as real. Won't that draw fire?" She looked up. "So let it." That night, Levi hosted a gathering in the cellar beneath the old blacksmith's. No formal invitation, just a knock sequence and trust. 24 people came, young and old, ranchers, midwives, a former deputy with one hand and a temper like broken glass. Asha stood before them. "I'm not here to tell you what to believe," she began. "I'm not here to promise safety." She held up the burned corner of her old bounty notice. "This is what they offered to make me disappear. But I didn't. And I'm not going to." Murmurs spread. Faces shifted from fear to recognition. "I didn't survive because I'm stronger than you," she continued. "I survived because someone showed me what truth sounded like when it was spoken out loud. So I'm asking you to do the same." A tall woman at the back raised her hand. "And if they come again, what then?" Asha didn't flinch. "Then we show them that the fire never went out." After the meeting, several stayed to talk. Some asked questions. Others shared stories of lost sons, buried letters, small wins. Luma listened closely, memorizing names. Elijah drew their faces with charcoal on old ledger pages. Levi stood with Asha as the crowd dispersed. "You really believe this'll hold?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "But it's better than silence." Later that night, as the others slept, Asha walked through Roost Hollow alone. The air was thick with wood smoke and moonlight. Dogs barked far off. She stopped near the old church and sat on the steps. The town was still scared, but it was also listening. She looked at the steeple, half-burned, leaning to one side. "You once said truth spreads like a campfire," she whispered into the dark. "Well, Caleb, it's starting to catch." Behind her, the door creaked open. Caleb stepped out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He sat beside her. "You can't fix it all," he said. "No," she replied, "but I can damn sure light the match." The next morning, Asha made a decision. They'd ride south again, not to hide, but to build. Levi would stay and hold the line in Roost Hollow, spreading messages through the routes they'd secured. Asha, Caleb, Luma, and Elijah would take the fire with them. Town to town, name to name. No banners, no speeches. Just presence. Just the sound of truth getting louder. Before they left, Levi handed Asha a sealed envelope. "From a rider who passed through 3 days ago," he said. Didn't give his name. She opened it on the ridge outside town. Inside was a list. Names, dozens, some crossed out, others marked with stars. At the bottom, a note. "They think you're a memory. Prove them wrong." She folded it, tucked it beside her heart. They rode out at noon. This time they weren't following trails. They were making them. And behind them, Roost Hollow didn't feel like a ghost town anymore. It felt like the first drumbeat of something real, something rising. The valley before them shimmered with heat and dust, a stretch of land scarred by old betrayal and older battles. Asha pulled her coat tighter against the wind. It wasn't cold, it just carried something with it. Something mean. Caleb noticed it too. His horse shifted nervously beneath him, ears twitching at every gust. Behind them, Elijah and Luma rode quietly, their eyes wide with the kind of tension that doesn't come from fear, but from knowing fear is coming. The path to Bitter Trace was narrow and crumbling. The town had once been a gold post, a promise of something glittering. Now it was a warning. Empty buildings leaned like drunks against one another. Signs faded, windows broken. But there were people. Watching. Always watching. Asha dismounted first. Her boots hit the dust with a low thud. She motioned to the others. "Stay near. Don't show your hands unless you need to." Caleb nodded, scanning the roofs. "You think they're ledgers?" She shook her head. "No. Worse. Opportunists." They walked down Main Street, the air thick with silence. A man stepped out of the saloon, hat low, jaw set. Behind him, another. Then a woman with a scar along her cheek, leaning on the porch rail like she owned the horizon. "You looking for someone?" the man asked. Asha didn't break stride. "No. But you might be." He frowned. "That's so," she stopped. Faced him square. "You heard the stories. Maybe you think I'm one. Maybe you want to find out." Silence. Then the woman chuckled. "Don't look like much." Caleb stepped forward. "That's where most folks go wrong." Asha raised her voice slightly, just enough to carry. "We're not here to settle. We're not here to steal." She held up a folded paper. The same list Levi had given her. "We're here because some names on this list passed through this town and never came out." That got attention. The woman's smile vanished. The man's hand hovered near his belt. "You accusing us?" he asked. "No," Asha said. "I'm warning you. If they're buried out there, I'll find them. If they're alive, I'll take them with me." "You think we're scared of one woman?" Asha took a slow step forward. "No," she said. "But I think you're scared of what I remind you of the day you stopped being human." That hung heavy. The woman with the scar spit. "You better ride on, girl." But Asha didn't flinch. "Tell me where they are," she said, "or I'll start digging." The man snarled. "You got no authority here." Asha looked past him at the street, then at the hills. "No," she said, "but I've got a shovel and nothing left to lose." The standoff broke when an old man stepped from the shadows of the blacksmith's ruin. He limped forward, hat in hand. "I seen them," he said quietly. "Took the south trail, headed toward the canyons, about 3 weeks back." Asha turned. "You sure?" He nodded. One had a bad limp. The other wore a red kerchief, like she meant something by it. Asha lowered the paper, folded it carefully. "Thank you." The others didn't speak as she passed, just stared, and she didn't look back. Outside of town, they made camp in a gulch where the rocks echoed whispers. Luma poked at the fire. Elijah cleaned his boots with a stick, quiet and small beside the growing flame. Caleb sat beside Asha. "You think we'll find them?" he asked. She looked into the fire. "I think if we don't try, no one else will." He handed her a flask. "Then we ride at first light." The canyon was a scar carved by gods. Sheer walls, burnt orange and red, curled through the desert like veins. The trail was hard winding. Tracks faded fast in the heat, but Luma spotted one, then another. A thread of movement heading deeper. They followed it into the rocks until the sun hung low and mean. Then came the sound. a voice, singing, low, broken, familiar. Asha raised a fist. They stopped. She dismounted, crept forward through the narrow pass, heart hammering like it remembered something awful. At the end of the trail, in a clearing between two boulders, sat a woman, red kerchief around her throat, eyes sunken, lips cracked, but alive. Asha stepped forward. "Ellie," she said. The woman blinked, looked up. Recognition flared, then pain. Asha knelt. "It's me. You're safe now." Ellie reached for her fingers, trembling. "They said you were dead." "Not yet," Asha said. "But I might be if we stay here." They helped her up. She leaned heavy on Caleb. Behind her in the shadows, another figure stirred. The man with the limp. He had a broken leg splinted with tree bark. His eyes were glassy with fever. Elijah Asha called, "Bring water." The boy rushed forward. Together they lifted him onto a blanket, built a stretcher from saplings. That night, under stars that felt closer than breath, Asha sat beside Ellie. "They took everything," Ellie whispered. "Our letters, our stories." "But not your voice," Asha said. "You're still here. That's what scares them." Ellie closed her eyes. "It hurts to remember." Asha touched her hand. "That's how you know it's real." The man with the limp stirred, muttered something. Asha leaned closer. "What did he say?" Caleb asked. She listened again, then whispered, "Tell them we're not shadows. Tell them we're coming." They rode out 2 days later, Ellie in better shape. The man, his name was Jonah, still weak but awake. The group moved slow now, but they moved, each mile closer to the truth and farther from silence. Because in the distance, through the haze and heat, Roost Hollow had sent a signal, smoke in the sky, and with it a message: "You lit the fire. We'll keep it burning." The wind howled over the mesa as Asha stood with her boots planted and eyes narrowed against the coming storm. Behind her, the others made camp low in the basin, sheltered between stone ridges. Luma tied down the canvas, Elijah stacked wood, and Caleb kept watch with his rifle across his knees. Jonah still slept most of the day, wounds slow to heal. Ellie, though bruised, had begun to speak more, voice like cracked porcelain, fragile but unbroken. But Asha, she stayed above, watching. Levi's smoke signal had come 2 days ago. A thin spiral of dark thread rising from the northwest ridge, not fire but code. One curl-long pause, 2 short breaks. It meant danger close. It meant change. Caleb climbed to her side, eyes squinting into the red-orange horizon. "You waiting on something, I'm counting." "How many things could go wrong?" she said. "That many, huh? More." They stood like that side by side as thunder rumbled far off. Lightning spidered across the clouds, but held its strike. "They're calling a meet," she said finally. 5 towns, maybe 6. It's happening at Copper Hollow. End of the week." Caleb frowned. "That's Ledger country." "Used to be," she said. "Now it's just scared country." "You gonna speak?" "I have to. Won't be safe." It never was. By dawn, they were riding again. The air felt tighter, like the land itself was holding its breath. Ellie and Jonah stayed behind. With a ranching family, Levi trusted people with walls and weapons and a knack for silence. Asha didn't like leaving them, but the others couldn't travel at speed. And speed mattered now. They reached Copper Hollow after 3 days. The town wasn't much, just a trading post, a feed barn, and 2 saloons that served more whispers than whiskey. But the old mill on the edge of town had been cleared for the meeting. People came quiet, on horseback, on foot. Faces wrapped in scarves, eyes hard and wary. They gathered in a wide circle beneath the high timber beams. Asha stood in the center. She didn't speak first. Levi did. He laid out the facts. Towns reclaimed, letters intercepted, survivors returned. He spoke of the slow shift, the whisper movement of truth in places once silenced. Then he nodded to Asha. She stepped forward, took off her hat, held it in both hands like something sacred. "You don't know me," she began, "and you don't have to. But you've heard the stories. Maybe you think they're lies, or exaggerations, or just another version of the truth told too loud." She let that sit. "I'm not here to be a symbol. I'm not here to lead an army. I'm here because there's still a hole in the dirt where too many names belong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She raised the folded list from her coat. "These are the names we've found, and these," she tapped the margin, "are the ones we haven't." Someone near the back spoke up. "So what do you want from us?" Asha looked around. "I want you to remember," she said. "I want you to say their names out loud in your homes, in your fields, in your churches. I want you to write them where they can't be erased. Because if we forget them, we become what they feared we'd be quiet." A silence deeper than discomfort settled. Then Luma stepped forward. Her voice was small but carried. "My father died in Ledger's camp. Not from wounds, from silence." She held up a carved stone. "He made this before they took him. Said it would remember if I did." She handed it to Asha. And just like that, others followed. Small offerings, tokens, names, a ribbon, a badge, a page from a hymnal. And slowly the circle became something else. Not a war council, not a rebellion, a memorial. And from that weight, something real took shape. A woman from Ridgevale stood next. She'd lost 2 sons. But she'd kept the ledger they wrote in poems, doodles, plans for a cattle drive that never happened. She passed it around. Hands touched it like it was holy. Then a former deputy raised his hand. "I was part of the takings," he said. "I followed orders because I was scared. But I remember every name. I can write them down, if someone's willing to read them." Asha stepped forward. "I will." They stayed 3 days in Copper Hollow. Built a wall in the mill, each plank holding a name, a carving, or a story. The townsfolk called it the Long Line. People came to add to it. Others just came to look. On the 3rd night, Caleb found Asha sitting alone beside it. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, then whispered, "I thought we'd have to shout, but they're already listening." He sat beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You changed the story." "No," she said. "We just started telling it out loud. But it couldn't last, not without resistance." The next morning, a rider came fast from the east, pale, bleeding. "They burned Fallow Creek," he gasped. Said it was a warning. He handed Asha a torn scrap, a symbol carved into it. The old Ledger brand, modified, meaner, sharper. Levi cursed. "They're regrouping." Asha stood, voice cold as flint. "Then so are we." Before they left, Luma added one more message to the long line, etched into the wood with her pocket knife. They wanted us quiet, but all they did was teach us how loud memory can be. Asha watched her finish it, then whispered, "This isn't a fire anymore. It's a reckoning." The torchlight bled down the ridge as Asha led the riders through the valley, every hoofbeat echoing like a vow not yet broken. They came in silence, no banners, no shouting, only the thrum of steady purpose. Behind her, over 40 strong, ranchers, traders, mothers with old rifles, a young man who'd been mute since his brother disappeared, even the ex-deputy from Ridgevale carrying a small tin of ashes. It wasn't an army. It was something older, a reckoning. They moved under the moon through broken trails and hollowed-out fields. By morning, they reached the outskirts of Fallow Creek, or what was left of it. Blackened timbers, a well choked with ash. One house still stood barely. A child's shoe lay half-buried in the dust. Luma dismounted first. She walked the remains of what had been a church, picked up a burned crossbeam, and held it like a question. Elijah stared at a broken lantern. They did this because we remembered. No, Asha said. They did this because they're scared we won't forget. Levi rode up beside her, his eyes hard. There's a name behind this, he said. A new leader. Goes by the Voice. Claims he's restoring order. Restoring silence, more like Asha muttered. He's moving west, Levi continued. Toward Redstone Bluff. Got a convoy. Guns. Men who don't ask questions. Asha stared toward the horizon. Then we meet him there. You're sure? No, she said. But if we don't stand here, we'll be running forever. They buried what they could that afternoon. Planted crosses and stones with names, even if guessed. Ellie had taught them sometimes naming the dead was how you gave the living permission to speak. That night they built fires, not to warm, to signal. And from the hills others came. By morning they numbered 63. By noon they moved again. Redstone Bluff wasn't a town. It was a statement. A ridge carved by wind and time, once a lookout post for miners. Now it held something darker. Asha and Caleb scouted first. They saw the flags, the crude watchtowers, the men with scars and long coats who moved like they were already ghosts, and in the center a stage, fresh built, for spectacle. They're planning something, Caleb said. They're planning a performance, Asha replied. That night, under starlight, she met with the core group. We strike at dawn, she said. Not to kill, to disrupt, to remind them we're still here. Levi frowned. You think we can turn the tide? No, she said. But we can turn their eyes. And that's how it starts. Luma raised her hand. If I don't make it, Asha cut her off. You will. But if I don't, Luma insisted, tell them I died loud. Asha didn't smile. She just said, You won't die at all. The sky was bruised gray when they moved. Asha rode point. They crested the bluff just as the Voice began his speech. He was tall, angular, dressed in preacher's black. A smile too white. Eyes too dead. Below him a crowd tied, gagged, forced to listen. He raised a book, shouted something about purity and peace through silence. Then came the first signal, a torch rolled from the ridge. The second, a call, Elijah's voice yelling a name they'd stolen. The crowd turned. Confusion. Then chaos. From the flanks, Asha's people surged, not in violence, in presence. Banners not of war, but names. This is who you took. This is who we remember. People shouted their own stories, held up letters, pictures, charms. The Voice raised his gun, fired once into the air. Enough, he bellowed. You think noise is power. You think memory is a weapon, Asha stepped forward. No, she said. But silence was yours, and we're taking it back. He aimed at her, pulled the trigger, click, empty. She kept walking. You wanted a stage, she said. Here's your audience. He reached for a knife. Levi tackled him. Others surged forward, not to kill, but to hold, to bind, to name. Later, when it was done, they found the book he carried. Inside were names, crossed out, dozens. Asha flipped through slowly. Ledger's old tricks, Caleb said. No, Asha said. This is new. This is worse. He wasn't killing voices. He was replacing them. She burned the book, then turned to the crowd, those who'd watched and those who'd fought. We don't end with fire, she said. We end with truth. That night on the bluff, they built a new wall, like the one in Copper Hollow. But this one they called the Echo, and every name added to it rang louder than any bullet. In the quiet that followed, they began to rebuild not just fences or walls, but stories. People spoke freely, some for the first time in years. Children asked questions and were answered with truth, not fear. The older ones taught songs once banned, and in those verses memory found its rhythm again. One woman brought out a quilt stitched with names, every thread a testimony. Levi, standing beside it, added a square of his own, his brother's bandana frayed at the edge. Elijah helped carve symbols into the ridge's stone, marking the day, not with triumph, but with honesty. Luma collected fragments of old letters burned at the corners and sewed them into a book with blank pages waiting for new voices. And Asha, she simply listened. Not because she was tired, though she was, but because this was the point all along, to make space, to hold silence open long enough for others to speak into it. The wind changed that night. Less cruel, less demanding. It carried laughter now, and names. And in this morning before they broke camp, they added one final message to the wall. If silence was a weapon, then story is our shield. As the fire burned down, Asha stood at the ridge's edge. Caleb joined her. You think it's done? He asked. No, she said. Then she turned to him, voice firm, eyes full. But tomorrow, for the first time in a long time, we're not running toward the fire. We're walking out of it. And behind them the ridge echoed, not with fear, but with voices. Alive. Remembered. Relentless. The sun rose behind the broken ridge, casting long shadows over what remained and what had begun again. Asha stood at the edge of the bluff, the morning wind catching her coat, as the fires of the night before turned to smoke and memory. Below, the people moved not in chaos, but in calm, clearing ash, stacking stones, laughing in small, cautious bursts like music slowly returning to a place that had forgotten song. They didn't need her name. They needed the space she helped make. And that was enough. Somewhere behind her, Caleb packed supplies. Luma sewed more pages into the ledger of names. Levi taught a boy how to cut wood right so it wouldn't splinter. This was the real fight, Asha thought. Not the guns, not the fire, but this quiet choosing to keep living, keep remembering, keep trying. She walked the ridge one last time. Every name on the echo felt heavier today. But not with sorrow, with weight, like stones at the bottom of a riverbed, holding ground steady. An old man approached her near midday. He held a fiddle case and a pair of boots too worn to patch. I didn't fight, he said, but I watched. That counts, doesn't it? It does, Asha said, but don't stop there. He nodded and left a string of old prayer beads at the wall. Children added drawings. A woman set a folded quilt square beside the ledgers. One man just sat and cried. By evening, the wall looked less like a grave, more like a home, a memory with roots. Asha sat by the fire as stars blinked back into the sky. You leaving? Caleb asked. Yeah, she said. Not running, just moving. Where they forget what this meant. He nodded. You think they'll listen? Some will, she said. Enough to keep the fire lit. He handed her a piece of paper, a new map, marked with towns, places rising. Follow the sparks, he said. She smiled, tucked it in her coat. Before dawn, she saddled her horse. Didn't say goodbye. Just left a note by the fire pit. Remember why we spoke. Remember who couldn't. She rode slow at first, watching the ridge grow small behind her, then faster into wind, into sky. The West had always been wild, but maybe now it could also be kind. And that was enough for her to keep riding. Later that week, in a town still rebuilding its chapel, an old man stood up at a meeting and asked the room, what if we taught the kids to ask why instead of what? In a far-off canyon, a traveling nurse passed around a battered copy of the ledger. She didn't say who wrote it, just that it had helped her remember her sister's name. And on a train station wall in a mining town, someone painted in bright red, if they stole your voice, sing louder. Asha saw these echoes not as tributes, but as torches, and each one told her to keep going. At a dry well settlement, she helped mend a fence and buried a letter from a girl who never made it home. The wind scattered the dirt and then went still, as if even it understood. In a valley camp, she played the morning flute once more. This time the notes were clearer. Still not beautiful, but full. Whole. An elder sat across from her and said, "You carry stories like seeds." Asha smiled. "Only works if someone's willing to plant them. Then keep sowing." She did. She taught a group of children to write their names into the dirt, not to mark territory, but to see themselves. One boy asked, "What if the rain washes it away?" "Then you write it again," Asha said, "and again, until the land remembers too." In a desert town too small for maps, a woman handed Asha a tin badge. It had no shine left, just scratches and weight. "I heard what you did up north," the woman said. "You want a title?" "No," Asha said, tucking the badge in her coat. "But I'll take the weight." She passed through canyons where her name had been outlawed, saw it now carved into stone, not as a warning but a reminder. A shopkeeper handed her a journal, empty pages. The man said nothing, just nodded. Asha wrote one sentence in it that night: "The quiet will never be empty again." And it wasn't. People kept speaking. They shouted, whispered, wrote poems, wove quilts, named their children after those who never got the chance to be old. They didn't need permission, just space. And Asha kept writing, not to lead, not to follow, but to keep space open. In the final winter, she stopped in a town where no one knew her name. It was peaceful. It was enough. She taught school there, helped build a library, didn't say much about where she'd been, but every now and then someone came asking, and she'd smile and say, "Sit down. I'll tell you a story." Because the story didn't belong to her. It belonged to every voice that had ever been taken, and through her they had found their way home. In the final page of her journal, she wrote, "We didn't shout because we were angry. We shouted because they told us not to. We remembered because forgetting was what they wanted most. We lived, and that was our answer." And with that, she closed the book. Not the story, just her part in it. Because somewhere out there, another fire was starting, and someone new was listening. The fire never died, not really. It lived in the hands of those who dared to remember, those who carried names like lanterns in the dark. The fire never died, not really. It lived in the hands of those who dared to remember those who carried names like lanterns in the dark. The fire never died, not really. It lived in the hands of those who dared to remember those who carried names like lanterns in the dark. The fire never died, not really. It lived in the hands of those who dared to remember those who carried names like lanterns in the dark.